What's going on, everyone? Nick from Comic Culture here. Welcome to another episode of Creator Conversations. In this episode, we are blessed to talk with the one and only Jim Zub about his new Conan run and the Battle of the Blackstone. Of course, like always, I'm joined with Stu from Dr. Doom's Fan Club and Eric from 9 Panel Grid. We really hope you enjoy this conversation. We had a great time talking about the new series coming out and our new love for Conan the Barbarian in general. So we hope you enjoy this conversation. Let's get into it right now. Jim Zub, thank you so much for joining us. We are just huge fans of what you're doing over in Conan right now, and we're just blown away by your work right now. How you been, man? Thanks for joining us.
I'm good. I'm doing really good. We're recording this on a Friday night. It's been a busy week, but hit the deadlines. I'm in good shape. I'm doing really good. Things have been absolutely amazing, and moving through September with strength. It's nice. Yeah.
This year is flying by for sure, but we really appreciate you coming on. I almost called you Grim Jim Zub because I didn't for two reasons. One, it's a tongue twister, and I didn't want to screw it up and have to do it multiple times. And two, because I heard you in previous interviews talk about how you can gauge what kind of fan you're dealing with based on how they greet you
when they've encountered my work for the first time. It is amazing.
Exactly.
You go to a convention and literally someone walks by the table and they go, "That's Grim Jim," and you're like, "Yep, that." Grinning Canadian. He's the grimmest dude you know. It's very true.
Yeah. Well, it's very appropriate here because again, through someone's comic journey, I've been reading since about 2016. I'm exploring and I'm realizing I'm finding people all the time. Like it's a never ending thing, right? And I've been really blessed to come across your work with Conan the Barbarian, and it's led me
comics in 2016.
Yeah, I was a late bloomer.
You're just a wee comic reader. Oh, that's so sweet.
But I'm catching up. I'm doing my best to catch up.
That's awesome. For sure.
Great. But I am newer to the Conan universe for sure. And I just want to kind of go around the panel real quick and talk about our familiarity with the characters so you can kind of get oriented to where we are coming from, so to speak. So I'm going to bounce it over to Eric. I'll bounce it over to Eric. Eric, man, what's your basic familiarity with Conan, and what are you thinking about the character, man?
You know, honestly, I'm very much in the same boat as you in regard to like your Conan level of experience. Whereas like Conan was my dad's comic, like very honestly, right? Not even just a saying. He used to pick up Savage Sword magazine style way back in the day when I was getting my Jim Lee X-Men comics. And I was always just like, they don't have powers, you know, like Conan has a sword, big deal. Like I'm not for that. Now I'm my dad's age when he was getting it, and I absolutely love everything about it. So.
It sounds kind of funny to say I'm like everyone's dad's favorite comic, but it's kind of true. Like the number of people that I'm meeting, particularly now, who have really come back to the book in a big way. People old enough to be my dad, even my grandfather's age, who are like coming, out of the woodwork and telling me that they love this book and that it's a big nostalgia bomb for them, but it's also it's new readers too. It's a really cool, eclectic kind of mix of old fans and new. And you really do realize that you're part of this incredible legacy. But you're also trying to make it feel fresh and easy for people to jump on. And that's that weird kind of tightrope that you're walking with it for sure.
Well, you're doing a great job with that for sure. So we really appreciate that. Stu, what's your general familiarity with Conan?
Yeah, just to speak to that, Jim, like 2024 is the year I became a Conan fan for sure. I think Nick put me on issue 7 or 8. And so now I'm reading both that and Savage Sword. Just to further expound on that, how do you balance that act of like appeasing the longtime hardcore fans and trying to bring new readers on board?
Well, so for me, it's really a matter of you want to try and channel the feeling that the book had in the Bronze Age, right? That 70s and 80s kind of feel, particularly the best of the Savage Sword magazine, because it had this raw kind of power to it. It also had some of the best artists in the business. It had a much more mature kind of sensibility because it didn't have to follow the Comics Code Authority. And so we're trying to bring that sort of element to the monthly book. And then, of course, Savage Sword, we want to have just that pure kind of black and white anthology sort of experience. And so when I had the chance to put together the proposal for Heroic Signatures and Titan for this relaunch, it was really a matter of kind of drilling back and going, okay, what are the absolute core elements that seemed, when the fan base was at its most fervent, and the readership was largest, why? Why was this character shoulder to shoulder bestseller with everything else at Marvel. And what are those qualities? You know, some of it's the art and some of it's the feel and the way the narration worked. And this character has a 90-year, you know, more than 90-year publishing legacy and 50 years in comics. And to pretend that that's not important, or to just say we can throw that all out and just do it different, is foolish. But on the other hand, I needed to be able to tell stories that are new so that the old readership doesn't know what's going to happen next. And that's why I was pretty insistent that we don't do a lot of adaptation, that we're not just doing the same stories you've seen before adapted multiple times, and trying to make, you know, it's amazing the kind of phases that comics have gone through, not to get too in the weeds here, but like decompressed storytelling, you know, and cinematic kind of stuff is been such a valuable kind of change in the industry from the 2000s. But now I think we're also seeing some of the benefits of some of the older books and what they brought to it as well. And that you can have a lot of story that you feel like you're getting your real money's worth, you know, between the covers every single month. So I'm trying to make those really dense, meaty chapters. I really want to have a little more of that literary kind of flair in the narration that does feel like a bit of a throwback, but we've got a mature reader's book and we've got the fidelity of modern printing. And so it's sort of like, it is trying to do both. It is a constant sort of tug of war to sort of go, okay, what are the best qualities we can bring from those old books, but still use what we have at our advantage? Yes. There is going to be a trade paperback. Yes, there is going to be these broader story arcs. We're not just doing done in ones and two-parters, and we can plan out this big kind of mythic thing. But I also want you to feel like you're getting your hit every 30 days and that you're getting that satisfying kind of subscription feel like you were reading it back in the day. One of the ways I sort of described it was like, and I don't think we're better than the old material by any means. But that we're giving you the book that you thought, if you were a kid in the 70s, that we're giving you the book that what it felt like you when you were 12, 13, 14, but now you're 40 or 50. And we're giving you that same kind of like pulse pounding, intense action, that we're going further than they could have gone back in those days, which actually weirdly kind of reflects older, because the original pulp stories from the 30s are violent and brutal in a lot of ways, in ways that they couldn't do in the 70s. There's a lot of times when they're adapting those stories where they have to curb a lot of the violence from what Robert E. Howard wrote in the original text. And now we can kind of unleash it on the page where it's appropriate. And I feel like there's that weird line of sensationalism, or, you know, that you could push it too far and just make it, you know, disgusting for the sake of disgusting. And it's like, no, these bursts of violence have a purpose in the story, and they're emotional and they're intense, and you know you're going to get them because it's a Conan story, and it's how do we use them judiciously and where do we pay them off?
Man. I go back to thinking about like just the legacy of the character in general. And can you go back and when you first started writing the character of Conan the Barbarian, how does the publisher handle that? Like, how do they handle that from like a legacy perspective? Do they just bring a truckload of trades to your house, or do they rely on you to like have that back knowledge already?
I think it's different for every writer. I don't want to speak for everybody else, right? So Conan, if your viewership isn't aware, is older than Superman by 6 years. The character is a literary icon, kind of the foundation of the sword and sorcery genre. One of the most well-known pop culture characters, and arguably probably the most single named fantasy character, that if you just go out on the street, I'm not talking Comic-Con, I'm just saying you say the word barbarian or you say the word, you know, Conan, like people know that character.
It's synonymous.
All over the world. And I learn more about that as the book comes out in more and more languages, and our fan base is really, really intense in the best way possible. And so you can be overwhelmed by it, by the sheer amount of material and by the what that represents. But I think like any iconic character, you can't know it all. And in many ways, the good thing is that the canon material, the actual stories written by Robert E. Howard, there are 21 short stories, and they are short. Most of them you can read in one sitting because they were done for the pulps. They were meant to be disposable entertainment. Several of the stories were serialized over a couple issues, but the vast majority of them are sit down, read, get your entertainment, get out. And they play at a larger world and they hint at the geography and the cultures, and then they lean into a few specific places, for those adventures, and they create this wonderful stew of a land that feels like it's got a vast history and it's got all these places just out of reach and just out of sight, but it doesn't name them all and it doesn't put them all out in the light. And that's one of the things I really love about it. Like Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, he's very much a world builder in that broad sense. All the cultures and the languages and the architecture and the stuff is a lot more of it is laid out in something like the Silmarillion or even in the historical kind of text stuff that he has in the Lord of the Rings. And it's pretty exhaustive. And Howard is a lot more kind of, I don't want to say smoke and mirrors in a bad way, like in a sense of it's like a magic trick. Like it's like this shadowy place, and Conan is just interacting with little bits that come out in the torchlight, and everything else is mystery and scary and dangerous and weird. And you don't need to know it all because Conan doesn't know it all. And the movements of gods and demons and the broader world, even the politics, even when he becomes king, it's like he knows what is the immediate threat, or he understands the immediate kingdoms and the politics happening there. But stuff happening on the other side of the continent, we're not going to find that out. That's not crucial to this story that we're getting. And so you get the feeling that you're in the midst of this wonderful epic, but it never feels like I must know every single thing about it. I just need to know, what is Conan's part in this? What does he got to survive? What is at stake? Let's go. I tell people all the time, in a lot of ways, Conan's easier to dive into than any superhero title, because all you need to know is the Hyborian Age is like a prehistory of our world. Conan is an adventurer and a wanderer. He is a pirate and a king and a thief. And everywhere he goes, something badass is going to happen.
Yeah.
Go. It's my job to know the geography and the places and more of that in depth. I could tell you exactly where this takes place on the timeline or whatever. But that's also because I'm the flagship writer. Most of the writers who are doing a Conan story in Savage Sword, they don't need to know that stuff either. They just need a cool premise and they can pay that thing off. You know what I mean? Like I'm pretty sure if I asked Frank Thierry, like, what stories does your, werewolf story take place between? He's going to be like, what do you?
Doesn't matter.
It's Conan kills friggin' werewolves, dude. Like, don't worry about it. Except he'll say it in the most amazing Brooklyn accent of all time.
Right.
But for me, it's like, because I'm doing the monthly, that's different. Then you're like, okay, I've got to have a bigger plan. We have to think in terms of these bigger movements. And yet, hopefully in a way that the monthly reader doesn't feel overwhelmed, that I'm just giving you all the pieces, when you need them, as you need them. And that's my job, is to keep the immediate, in focus. What does Conan want? What is at stake? What is the treasure? Who's in danger? Where is he? Let's go.
Right. Yeah.
Jim, you had mentioned, to circle back, towards one of your earlier statements here, you mentioned your proposal for taking on Conan, right? Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you have a background in teaching animation? Am I wrong?
I do. So I've been a professor at Seneca College on the York University campus here in Toronto for 20 years. God, I say it out loud.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, I'm currently on sabbatical. So I was supposed to take a sabbatical in 2020. And for some reason, that didn't happen because the world spun off its axis. So for 4 years, I've been deferring this sabbatical. My creative career has always kind of run parallel with my teaching career. And the school's been really amazing and flexible. They love that I'm doing this kind of work and I'm doing conventions. And obviously, it's a bit of a feather in their cap that they can say, oh, this guy does work for Disney and Marvel and Bandai Namco and Cartoon Network and, DC Comics or whoever.
Sure.
And so, I've got a good head for academia. And it's one of the reasons why I really enjoy breaking down the process of creativity as well. On my website, I've got a lot of free tutorials that I wrote early in my writing career about what I was learning as I was learning it. So it's like, hey, I have a few successful proposals with publishers, and these are the commonalities, and here's why I think a pitch works. And so in the early kind of days of Twitter and other social media, a lot of that stuff went viral, like because a lot of comic people weren't talking about process quite as much. And so I would get some work I would get from editors because literally they were sending people my tutorials to help their freelancers get better at doing pitching or understanding parts of the process. I'd worked at the Udon studio for several years as a project manager and an art director and an editor. So I've done editorial stuff. I've done lettering. I've done illustration. I've done coloring. I've kind of seen all kinds of different parts of the publishing and production beast, animation, video games, all sorts of stuff. And the more flexibility and the more things you do in the industry, the greater appreciation you have for everyone else's job. You know what I mean? And so, I try and bring all that stuff to both my writing and then my teaching. That when I'm talking, when students are coming in bleary-eyed, from deadlines, they had to pull all-nighters. I'm coming in bleary-eyed because I had a script deadline or I just got back from a convention in another time zone or, like whatever. And so we would commiserate over stuff that they could tell I'm passionate about these things and I'm traveling and doing stuff and hopefully giving them a bit of trying to model the creative, career and what this sort of looks like or feels like, or that, it does make you kind of keep you young and you are still excited about it, whatever decades into doing it and things like that. And so putting together stuff like proposals, there is a formal structure to it, but there's also, you're trying to use language that is passionate about the material. You want the person reading on the other end. People ask me, and I have on my website these like templates or ideas about how to structure a pitch. But the reality is the best pitch is the one that succeeds, is the one that breaks through and communicates to the person what your intent is, that they believe you're the right person for the job and they're willing to invest in it. And, the proposal I put together for Conan for Heroic Signatures and Titan was not highly formalized. It was much more kind of passionate dissertation on Conan as a character and a property and the possibilities therein. And I've sort of told this story, so I'll do the fast version. I've said this on multiple interviews. There was no way I was getting it. That's the craziest part. I had just,
because you're coming off of it, right?
Yeah, I just done the book at Marvel. It's now that we're a year and change into it and I've signed a long-term contract, I can be a lot more sort of flip about it, but I wouldn't have hired me. Like if I was them, I wouldn't have hired me. Like that's the truth. It seems in retrospect like a great idea because we have this hit book and we're kicking ass. But if I was the bean counter or the person on the other end, you're like, brand new publishing initiative from the ground floor. You know what we should do? We should get the guy who just did it to do it again. Better. And you're like, that doesn't seem like a smooth play. Like that's not a good marketing move. That's not a good publishing initiative. That isn't how you sell the thing. And so that proposal was almost like, I don't know how to put this without trying to sound like weird about it. It was just passion. It was almost pure passion because they'd seen that I could write the character and they knew that I had bigger ideas that we didn't get to. And I'm not following that playbook. I'm doing something very different in terms of the Titan series. But even still, they knew that there were bigger ideas there that we were hopeful to get to, and they didn't come to fruition. And so it was sort of saying, look, this is a very unique opportunity in terms of being able to take a 1,000-foot look at the entire property and give people a reason to get on board. And you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. What is really valuable and what do people respond to and why did they love this thing back in the day? I think you keep all that. Sounds so simple. Just keep the good stuff.
Yeah.
And just throw out all the crap, because that's how that
just
works.
Don't do the bad stuff again and keep
Stop doing bad stuff. That was my whole proposal. I just said, Jim's up. Stop doing bad stuff. I'll do the good stuff. And then they said, that's our guy. Done.
Right.
In.
Keep use that, man.
Right. Every pitch, that's all you got to do. Please stop publishing crap. I'm the good guy. So so you are, but you're trying to really focus and on very specific sort of traits of like not just what to keep, but also what is missing, what has not been there, or what is not being emphasized. And going back to the kind of primordial well of the Howard material and going, man, this stuff is dark. This stuff is nasty. This stuff is intense. There's an emotional intensity there. There's a lyrical, poetic kind of quality to the way Howard uses language. And Roy Thomas at his best was also using that same kind of stuff. And I know it feels archaic, and some people may roll their eyes at it, but if it's done well and the art, sings with it, it'll really push that drama. And it's something that we're not seeing very much of right now. I'm seeing a lot of comics where you could take all the dialogue in an entire issue of a comic and it would fit on less than half a page. You know what I mean? And
we don't want to name too many names.
No, but it's not to say that a fast read is a bad read, or dialogue, more writing is good. Because I don't think that these things are a one-to-one. Do you know what I mean? More words means I got my money's worth. Like, I remember Robert Kirkman was talking about when he was doing Invincible, and he was saying how the Marvel fans, when he was writing at Marvel, got really mad because they cut the page count. I could be misrepresenting this, but maybe it was 22 pages and then they went to 20 or something. And these people were calculating how much money they were spending per page and that they weren't getting their money's worth. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
And that was super important to them, right? That they weren't getting their money's worth because they could calculate how much they were paying per page. And he's thinking to himself, did you guys know we cut the page count for Invincible from 22 to 20, and we did it like 8 months ago and no one noticed? Because they were too busy reading a great story and enjoying the book every month. No one was sitting there with an effing calculator. Do you know what I mean? Like, and so in my head, it's not about, like, I just want you to feel like you're getting your money's worth. Like, that you read that story and you're like, damn it, where's the next one? Or, whoa, what a rush. This is great. I'm going to flip back through it. And so it's not like I said in my proposal, we're going to be 22 pages, and every issue we're going to have a 2-page spread that's going to blow your nuts off. And Jeff Shanks has to write a 2-page essay, because then people will read it longer and they'll feel like they got their dime's worth. But all those things, but those are things that exemplified qualities that I was talking about. Do you know what I mean? That we're giving you this lush blowout moment almost every issue, that there's this literary kind of quality that's taking you on this atmospheric ride, that the artwork, of course, is the highest quality that we can possibly muster from month to month to month. Every issue's got a banger of an opening. Every issue's got a wicked cliffhanger, or a, amazing to be continued ? And then Jeff's essays give you this context of historical legacy, that this thing has been around since the 30s, and it's important and it's cool, and look at all these funky bits of mythology and history that you didn't fully appreciate, And so when you put all that together, it does the thing that I wanted it to do. Does that make sense? Yeah. That was a really long-winded answer. Holy crap.
No, I think it's kind of funny though that based on what you were saying here, like you didn't think you were the right writer for the book, right? And I've also heard that.
No, I thought I was the perfect writer for the book. They just never give it to me again.
There we go. Okay,
It was deeply in my bones what I wanted to do. It's just I wouldn't have put my chips on me, because I know the marketing end of it and the very cold calculating publishing end of it, you know what I mean? And they look at the numbers and the.
Do you remember any highlights from the pitch, or anything that you were particularly proud of, trying to convey how you were feeling?
Yeah, it's a good question. That we could do an M-rated book, that we were going to do a mature reader's book, that Conan had never been a mature reader's book before, not even at Dark Horse, you know what I mean? And that therefore it would feel like it was unleashed on the page in a way that it hadn't been before. I know that was part of it. I also talked about the fact that, Howard was constantly weaving in horror and Lovecraftian kind of eldritch horror into his stories, and that the comics had not done very much with that. Every so often they would, there's horrific monsters or whatever, And yeah, okay, that thing looks demonic or whatever, but it wasn't like the kind of mind-bending cosmic stuff very often. You know what I mean? And that you wanted to get the sense that Conan was up against these impossible mythic things, that larger, like I was sort of saying before, movements of gods and demons are happening above Conan's senses. You know what I mean? And that we as the reader will get more, but maybe not all of it. But we get this broader sense that this whole thing is turning. And what's amazing about Conan is he is sort of the fly in the ointment. Like he can wreck the plans of emperors and kings and gods and monsters because he is the one thing they couldn't have planned for, and he's the one thing they can't kill, you know, and that's what makes him so cool. And he's never invulnerable, and he's not impenetrable. He gets his ass absolutely beat. You know, it's the difference. I think I really love, you know, those characters. I mean, a Howard character at their core is a character who gets up and keeps fighting. It's this Texas frontiersman that, you know, fights for what they think is right, you know, to their own death or whatever it might be, right? And you've got that kind of character with Logan or things like that. That's an archetypical sort of character. And I love, like, one of my favorite issues of Uncanny X-Men of all time is 205. It's called Wounded Wolf. It's Barry Windsor Smith, and it's Wolverine's just got we start the story with Wolverine got his ass beat off page by the Reavers, and he's on the run through the snow in New York City, and he's been beat so bad, he's gone nonverbal. He's like animalistic, and he's like running around the city trying to stay away from these killers. And he runs into Katie Powers, and because the Marvel Universe had wonderful continuity, they acknowledged that these characters know each other, that the Power Pack knows the X-Men because they met in an issue, you know, during Fall of the Mutants or whatever. And all of a sudden, this little kid who knows him as Mr. Logan sees this horrible, snarling monstrosity trying to heal his wounds and not get killed and not let innocent people die. And she's like taking him to the public bathroom and trying to sop up the blood. Holy crap, man. It's like the fact that Wolverine has been beat so bad, you're like, these villains must be the baddest thing ever. Like, that's what makes it cool. It's not that he's invulnerable, that his healing factor he can survive a nuke or whatever. It's the fact that he's just been tortured and is still going and is still heroic. I cannot tell you the number of times I've sent pages from Wounded Wolf to an artist that I'm working with. And I said, can we beat him this bad? Can we just just roll the dude through a dumpster 400 times so he looks like that? You know, that's what I want my hero to look like, that he just looks like he's pushed to the edge. And that to me makes for a more cool story. Not that they kick ass, but that they kick ass after just getting absolutely wrecked. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, they continue the mission, right? They continue moving forward and pushing.
So when I'm coming up with story ideas, sometimes I'm literally trying to be like, how bad can I make it? Like, how hard can I make this without it being past the point of credulity, right? Like, and so, you know, literally a whole story formed out of brainstorming, what's the worst thing I can do to Conan? And I was like, well, he'll be buried alive and he's got to crawl out of his own grave. And that was like Savage sort of Conan number 2. Right?
That was Savage number 2, right? Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah,
it's funny, that story I pitched. So there were 2 stories. I'm sort of jumping all over the place. When I was at Marvel, I had written previously Conan twice. I co-wrote Conan Red Sonja with Gail Simone at Dark Horse, 2015, 2016. Super fun. Oh my God, this is the only chance I'll ever get to write Conan. What a crazy concept. Then the character returns to Marvel, and I co-write him in the Avengers, No Road Home. And I wrote most of the Conan material in there, including that issue where he's running around the Hyborian Age with the Scarlet Witch and all that stuff. Super fun. Sean Isaac Druid is one of my favorite artists. Love collaborating with that guy. But both the Conan projects I'd done had been co-written. And so I had this egotistical part of me that really wanted a solo Conan credit. And so Mark Basso was the editor on the Conan series. Jason Aaron's doing the monthly book, and Jason always does really long runs. So I'm like, well, I'll never get to touch the monthly. Like, it's just not, don't even try, because Jason will be on this book until you're dead. And so, but they were doing Savage Sword as an anthology full color book. And so they were having rotating creative teams. And I thought, that's my way in. I'm just going to get this story out of my head. So I pitched Mark 2 potential stories for Savage Sword at Marvel. One of them was a story called The Gambler, which is the one they went with, which is Conan ends up the bodyguard of this merchant who's going to a gambling hall where you can literally bet your life away. And then he gets pulled into conspiracies and mysteries and murder and backstabbing, betrayal, and all sorts of cool stuff. And I wanted to make it feel like a tight mystery, using bits and pieces and ingredients that I felt were there in the Howard stories. And I would get that story, and that would be my mic drop. Like, this is a cool Conan story, just like the old school pulps. And that would drop the mic and never do a Conan story again. And the other pitch I sent, there was that one. And then I sent Leaving the Garden, which is the one that we eventually ended up doing, which is Conan crawls out of his own friggin' grave and has to get revenge on this, for this caravan that's been slaughtered that he was supposed to protect. And those are the two stories I pitched. And so what's amazing is getting to finally do both of them, one of them at Marvel and then one of them, eventually at Titan. And I feel like both of them have that quality. They have a very Howardian kind of feel to them, but they're not just replace one ingredient, from the originals. They take a kind of a bunch of the milieu of sword and sorcery, and they were some other visual kind of motifs that I thought were cool, and they feel Howardian, but not hyper derivative. And I would have been happy doing either one of them. And if that was the only last Conan I wrote, I would have been, happy not knowing what I had missed out on. But then Jason was only going to do 12 issues. And so by the time I did The Gambler, they were already looking for a new monthly writer on the book. And so lo and behold, my scripts dropped at just the right time to sort of be like, what about this guy? And so that got me on the radar for the owners of Conan. And that was the first time they really stood up and took notice. And they were like, this guy's got a cool kind of quality. And it's so funny because I had read the original Conan stories, but I had never dug deep into the Howard canon. And I didn't realize how deep, for example, Robert E. Howard wrote over 200 poems, for example. And he's written all sorts of lyrical stuff and ballads and historical texts and, thousands of letters and all sorts of things like that. And there was a section in The Gambler where Conan goes on this mad ass killing spree. And we've been building up the tension on it for all this time. It's Conan's story. He's going to go off.
Sure.
But we light the fuse. You don't know how long the fuse is before he explodes. And when we finally unleashed that thing, I was describing this 2-page spread, and I was trying to figure out how to, you don't do sound effects Roy Thomas didn't do sound effects. And during an interview, I don't remember what outlet he said there was no point in saying, / ugh, like a page after page. And so what you need to do is you need to use the narrative panels to describe things that you can't see on the page, the tension of the muscles or the smell of the coppery blood in the air or the icy clash of blades or whatever it might be, these qualities and these sensory bits of information that are, first of all, they're going to ground you in the experience of the moment. It's like everything gets a Zack Snyder slow-mo pan because you're hanging on that panel, imagining it crashing together. But then you don't have to write bang, bang, crash, crash, / you know what I mean? And over and over again. Because how many times can you do that? How many ways, how many apostrophes can you put in as the character is getting stabbed?
Right. Yeah.
And so now you get to give it this lyrical quality. Point is, I'm doing this 2-page spread of Conan going absolutely berserker. And I'm like, I need to write this lyrical thing. And I wrote a couple lines and I realized that they rhymed. And all of a sudden I was like, oh God, I'm going to sort of make it like poetry. And I actually wrote a note in the script that's like, maybe you guys will find this dorky, but I'm going to do this like a poem. And I told my editor, so if you don't like it, like, just tell me and I'll figure something out. And the Conan guys were like, he did a poem in the middle of a story. That's like a Howard move. Like, they were even more impressed. And I didn't even know that was something that had flipped the switch for them. That was such a big deal,
That's
which
cool.
was cool. Yeah. It feels of course, in the rearview mirror, it all seems like it just makes sense. But at the time,
you fell into that one. Yeah,
you're channeling as many of these qualities as you can. And when I lost it and then I got it back again, one of the things I knew is that, I had to put, not that I wasn't putting my all into it previously, but man, do you ever feel the pressure? Like, they've put this whole publishing initiative on me. If I screw this up, like I'm just walking trash. Like, I'm terrible. Just take your career and just ball it up and throw it in the waste. Right? And so I dug back into the text with such a maniacal, very much a studious kind of researcher kind of air to it. I was rereading the stories with a notepad beside me, and I was writing specific turns of a phrase, not because I wanted to copy them exactly, but because I was looking at even the cadence of language and the types of words he would use that wouldn't have come to mind for me first, right out of the gate. And so then I'm like, I have to think differently. I have to think differently about sentences and language. That I would occasionally trip across those things when I was writing it at Marvel, but now I needed the pure stuff. Like, I needed it like right in my veins every issue, because for the love of God, don't screw this up. And then that art's coming in from De La Torre, and you're just like, I can't write it purple. Like I can't go too epic, because look at this. It's crazy. It's absolutely mind-bendingly amazing. And Doug Braithwaite just as amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
Well, if this fails, it's not going to be the art, like it's all you, buddy. Like, better pull up your end of the bargain.
And I will say, as like a reader, you notice those art. Obviously, you notice those art changes in runs like this.
Of course,
this is a great example of, I don't mind the art change whatsoever.
Right.
It doesn't matter who's doing it, because they're both so good.
You always want to play to an artist's strengths, right? And so even though we have an ongoing continuity of story, I'm trying to do things that each artist does best, and they're very different scripts too, which is kind of wild to me. De La Torre, I write plot style. So he didn't want to be told how many panels to put on a page, for example. So I'll write these like couple paragraphs, like, here's the main events of the page. And if it's an action scene, I feel like I'm cheating a bit, because I'll just be like, Rob, you do Rob things. Like, just, they go badass on these cultists, and, one of the guys dies, and by the end of this, Conan's going to get his arm nearly, whatever. And they're going to leap from precipice to precipice. And then once I get the artwork, then I'm going back in and I'm doing the narration and all that stuff. Doug felt more comfortable with a full script. So he wanted to be told all the beats and what panels for what, and he'll change it still. He'll combine actions, or he'll break them into multiple panels sometimes, but he still wanted more of the skeleton there to hang it off of, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I'm writing most of the dialogue and most of the captions during the scripting phase. And then he comes in with the art, and then I'll nudge it or move stuff or shift. Whereas Rob's stuff, I'm not writing any captions, no dialogue, until I get that artwork. And then I'm literally filling it in. So I'm like, well, he gave me I told him this is a talkie page, and he gave me this many panels. And, Conan's got a grim ass look on his face here. So he's going to say this kind of a thing, which is going to fill this plot point. So I'm very much figuring out the dialogue in the moment. Very rarely am I telling him exactly what dialogue there is. Like, I'll tell him what the dialogue reveals, but the interplay of the characters, I'm literally like, well, he gave me a ton of room here, so I'm going to need 3 word balloons. And so it's like, what are those 3 word balloons? And I'm figuring it out as I'm looking at the expressions, and I'm sort of playing the moments out visually in front of my mind. And then, when it works, man, it feels like my fingers are crackling on the keyboards, like there's lightning shooting out. And it works. It's crazy. And whereas with Doug, I've got most of that dialogue there, and he's matching expressions to the dialogue that I've already written, for the scenes. Wow. And so it's a cool challenge, because it's 2 very different writing methodologies, but because both art teams are working simultaneously, it's constant, right? Like, I'm doing both, Rob is currently stepped away from working with me, because he's doing, this is public, they announced it at San Diego, he's doing a Savage Sword story with Roy Thomas. And so that's why we've got other artists that are stepping in. So Jonas obviously is doing the Blackstone miniseries. And I asked Jonas what he wanted. I said, do you want full script? Do you want outline? He goes, well, what do you do? And I said, good news, I'm doing both.
I do both.
I'm Swiss Army knife in this, man. It's the high morning age. I can do everything. So I just said, what do you want? And he's like, I'm pretty sure he said he's never worked from an outline before like that, where he got to pick all the panels. And so he said, can we try it on Free Comic Book Day? Because we did the 0 issue.
Yeah.
And he says, and if it sucks, we won't do that anymore. And I said, if it sucks, we won't do that anymore. And it didn't suck. It was great. And so I was like, do you mind if we keep doing that? He's like, no, this is kind of fun. It's like a totally different challenge for me. I was like, great. And so we did it plot style. So Blackstone's all plot style. I literally did the lettering script for issue 4 like 2 weeks ago. And it's crazy. And I'm so happy with it. And so now,
versatility.
Yeah, it's fun. And it keeps it fresh for me, man.
Yeah, it's got to.
It makes it a cool writing challenge for me where I'm able to figure out what I want to do and how I want to do it. What is going to make the best art? What is going to make the best story? What is going to make the artist happy? Happy artist, amazing issue, readers go crazy like that. This is whatever formula I'm plugging into the thing. And so, yeah, being able to do that is kind of great. So like Danica Breen is stepping in for 2 issues because Rob's not here. Danica is someone we've been wanting to work with. And so she's doing a 2-parter. And I said, again, what do you want to do? What do you feel like? And she's like, we're both Canadian. So it became an end. Like
whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to do.
It was like a war of politeness that we were just like crashing into each other. For God's sake, someone choose.
That's awesome.
So finally I said, I'm going to do outline because I'm under the gun. I've got a lot on my plate right now. Like, great. And so I did outline.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, she's doing a wonderful job with it.
That's great.
What's funny, though, is that while I was doing it, I did come up with specific dialogue for a sequence as I was crackling on the outline. So I started a separate document and I just dumped a bunch of dialogue in there. So I'm done probably about 1/5 of the script for dialoguing.
Oh, wow.
That she hasn't even seen yet. So I'll figure out if it fits what she gets me. But the pages are looking, of course, stunning, crazy, amazing, fill in the blank, And then the same kind of thing with those Savage Sword stories. So like Dagnino, who did that crazy caveman one that we did for Blackstone for issue 4, he was good. I love that. He was full script. But we're doing another story together. And I said, do you mind if we try outline? And he was like, I'm up for it. And so he's doing outline. So it's like we're switching gears to this other methodology for him. Man, he's so good. He's just great.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was the Brissa story I did full script because we were filling in so many gaps from when she disappears at the end of Battle of the Blackstone that I was like, we have to check all these boxes. And if I do it outline and you don't do the visual specific, we're just going to end up making a bunch of edits. So I need to kind of grab the steering wheel and really tightly plot this thing. So it's just sort of dependent on what the story requires, Yeah.
That's really cool. You mentioned one thing before, we're writing with Dark Horse, writing with Marvel and everything, and now writing over with Titan. So I'm interested in your evolution of the understanding of the character from then to now. And you talked a little bit about this already. Like you did a lot of research, you went back, you read a lot of things.
Mind-bendingly different.
Right. So like, what's your mindset now versus, in 2000?
I mean, Dark Horse was just like, oh my God, Gail called me, Gail knew I liked Conan. I had told her I liked Conan and Conan was cool. And I really loved her Red Sonja series she was doing at the time. And we're friends and whatever. And then she said, we're going to do this thing. So I did go back and reread some of the stuff, but it was with more or less like a general. I also kind of hit the high spots on some of my favorite Conan comics. I was like, oh yeah, I got this. He's a badass survivor. Yeah. And we, I did a little bit of diving so we could reference some story stuff, but in many ways it's very surface level. And so I feel like it worked. And I'm happy with that story. Don't get me wrong, but I can tell how much, kind of I'm throwing up chaff, so you don't realize I don't really know this stuff, or I'm sort of like,
Sure.
yeah, I'll use that terminology and I don't fully appreciate it, what it means. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At Marvel, obviously, I was doing them when I did Gambler. I specifically put them in a location where we weren't going to have to worry about a lot of continuity, because I wanted it to feel like a pulp story where you just got to self-contain. You just get dropped into it and it all kind of hooks together.
Just goes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just goes. And that was by design, because the original pulp stories have a lot of that feel to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I took over the monthly, that was such an insane process, because if you're launching a book at Marvel, it's like, there might be some flexibility on when that number 1 drops. You know what I mean? Like they can kind of go, oh, we're thinking February or March, maybe April. Or sometimes they're like deep under the gun on it. Or sometimes you're not their first choice, but they wouldn't tell you that. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh God, like we're on it now. And they need the script. They need the outline done. And then the outline's approved. And they're like, you've got 4 days to do the first script kind of thing.
Oh, great.
But I was, issue 13 of Conan. So it's like already on a monthly schedule. And so they're like, we need material. So you're throwing train tracks down and you're trying to get, cool ideas on the page. And I very much had an idea with the Marvel book that I wanted the book to be super easy entry points. So these, 3-4 part stories that were just like badass, cool Conan adventure. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to settle in and do like, oh yeah, the Conan book feels like classic sword and sorcery stuff. And you can pick it up anytime. And the problem with that mentality was I just wasn't thinking at the time. You're issue 13, so you don't have the benefit of a relaunch. You don't have the momentum of your new one or whatever. And I'm settling into a format that is so easy to pick up. It's just as easy to drop. Do you know what I mean? Like it's basically pick it up anytime. So like not
because it's episodic and there's nothing like connect. Right.
It doesn't matter.
I got you.
So basically you're like, so I don't need to be reading this. Like I can just get it in trade. Right. You're like, no, that's a terrible idea. You should be buying it monthly. Oh, why?
And the variants too.
Yeah, sure. And don't get me wrong. We still had cliffhangers and stuff.
Sure.
But what I would do is I had this idea where I would throw like one bit of a connective tissue where I would throw this idea into the first story, and then that pays off in the second story. So there is a thread of continuity, but it's so light and easy that I can tell it to you in one sentence. Like, hey, Conan found this cursed sword, and now he's taking the cursed sword back to the kingdom where it came from. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. And again, to me, in my head, it made sense because it was like, it's so easy. You can just start anytime. Are you reading Conan? It's really good. Pick up the latest issue and you'll know exactly what's going on. But on the other hand, it had this weird quality of like, but you don't have to be reading it. You can just, and then the pandemic hit and we're, just swirling around the toilet bowl because we were put on pause for 7 months and it's no one's fault. But all of a sudden, man, if we weren't a priority before, we're not a priority at all now. And so when we bounced back after the pandemic, I tried to do these tighter stories. I had time to build a story because I was on pause for 7 months. But by that point, it was like the die was already kind of cast and Marvel's whole publishing plan had changed. And all of a sudden it was like, you're the guy that's taking Conan out behind the shed and you got to put a bullet in his head. Like, you're just like, oh my God, like, my favorite thing. What am I doing? But you got to wrap it up. You got to sunset the book. And I did to the best of my ability. And I'm still proud of those issues. And I'm loved the creative team I worked with. And I love my editor, and everyone at the Marvel was really good, in a difficult circumstance. Right. And if you read issue 25 with Legacy number 300, and you read my short story, it has a real wistful air to it. It has a, you don't know what's going to happen, and life is difficult, and we carry on because we're survivors. Like, it's very much like, hey, we're in lockdown, and also
it's meta commentary.
I just lost my favorite thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, but I was proud of it, and that was the way it was going to be. And so again, in the rearview mirror, when we're putting together this new proposal and going to do the new series, it was like, can't miss. Every issue has to feel like it's a can't miss. Like, if you miss this month, Conan, you're an idiot, because crazy, amazing stuff happened in every issue, and don't hold anything back. Like I had big ideas for the Conan series at Marvel, and I was like, and in year 2, we're going to seed this little thing. And then you're going to think it's a little thing, but it's a big thing. And it's like, that seems like a really good idea, assuming you ever get year 2. You know what I mean? Like, and the current publishing market is, do you have 6 issues? Maybe not. You know what I mean? Like, what are the number of series that get announced as ongoings and they just get the noose around their neck by issue 3? You know what I mean? And so you're in this untenable position where you have to make big stories and create subplots and then be ready to just like eject at a moment's notice, right? It's not good for anybody. It's not good for the commerce. It's not good for marketing. It's not good for creativity.
Right.
And so I was like, don't hold anything back. Like, just go berserk, because this is your last shot. And Heroic had promised me 12 issues. They were like, you know, we believe in the book, and Rob's amazing, and you've got great ideas, but who knows? The comic market's crazy. So we can promise you 12, guaranteed 12. And I was like, they're saying 12, but they really can only really promise me 6. Like, 6 in my head, I feel. And then they were like, we're doing these 4-issue trades. I said, okay, I've got 8. That's what I've really got. Because if we're dead on arrival, then we can crawl probably for 2 arcs, and then I'll just slink my way, you know, defeated. Oh God, what have I done? It's twice loser, you know, or whatever. And, so don't hold anything back. It was just like rocket fuel. We got to go bonkers. And so how big can we go? How crazy can we go? What kind of ludicrous visuals can I lean into that only Rob De La Torre can deliver in that first arc? And, you know, he had been drawing these insane commission pieces of Conan in the whirling dervish of like 40 people trying to kill him, you know? And I was like, so I need to create situations where Conan is fighting like 40 things. Yeah. And although it's a mature reader's book, like, you know, I'm a little concerned about the sheer amount of limbs we may be lopping off here. So then this idea of, well, okay, so we can sort of do something maybe with the undead, and, oh, you know, Conan versus zombies, that's not a bad idea. Okay. And it's all sort of putting these pieces together in these bigger mythic structures, and then playing off of these other Howard kind of concepts. And you just start putting pieces down and trying to figure out where they fit, if they fit, what they represent, and when in the grand structure of the thing. And then the good thing is we had time. You know, that was what was so cool about it. Like, we announced that I was going to be the writer of Conan the Barbarian in 2022, and we weren't launching until July 2023, you know? And so, and when we announced that I was doing the book, it was like a big clown horn. Like, I don't think anyone responded. Like, there was a couple people that were like, really? You know, my friends were all very excited. Oh, Jim, you get to still do Conan. And then quietly, really? How did
he's coming back over here? Really?
Really? Like, oh, that's crazy, man. Good for you. You know, like this weird patting you on the back, like, wow, and you could hear between the lines, like in the, you know, in the brackets that weren't there, they're like, I guess they couldn't find anyone else, you know? And the reality was, it was a bake-off with like 10 other writers. You know, so, but it was just the way it was. But once the art came out, and then once, you know, Free Comic Book Day hit, then that was like a thunderclap, man. That was when it was, oh, you think you know what we got? Check this shit out. Like, it was a totally different, it was like casting a spell, man. It was the coolest. That Free Comic Book Day was the coolest thing, because we had so much pent up energy, and we had been working so hard for months and months and months and months and months. And finally we could show our mission statement and just be like, it's going to be like this, you know?
Yeah. And you've been killing it ever since. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was, it's been no problem. Really easy. No effort at all. I wish it was that simple. A monthly book is such an insane-o thing, by the way. Because you have a book goes through production, right? And production is come up with the story ideas, you know, however many months in advance. And then it's scripting, and then it's, you know, rough pages come in, and then pencils and inks. Yeah. And then colors, and then letters, and then proofing, and then printing. But while you send one off to print, another one moves into that, ready position, and another one's lining up in the previous stages. So you're never looking at one comic, you're looking at 6 in that pipeline.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But then you also have artists that are working out of order, multiple artists. Mm-hmm. Plus we're doing Blackstone, plus we're doing Savage Sword. So at any particular time, I'm looking at, I don't know, like 6-7 issues of comics, in different stages of production, in different parts of the beast, and you're trying to make sure that the stuff all matches. Mm-hmm. And every so often, if some little error slips through, the fandom's freaking out and they're just like, I can't believe no one, saw this. And you're like, dude, I swear, break, man. Like 12 people looked at this thing, but we're all very tired. Like we're trying very hard.
Right.
And so I have a lot of empathy when I see a mistake go to print. Like if I notice one, I'm just like, no one's happy about that. That is not good. I've been there. I get it. It's bonkers.
Well, I just want to just speak to that. Yeah. The contract. I feel like that's got to put you in such a great creative space, not only in planning stories, but incredible. Like just in comfort and that job security.
Yeah, to let your viewers know. So we announced at San Diego. I've signed I've already been on the book for like a year and with planning a year and a half, but like a year of production. And I've signed a 3-year extension. So I'm going to be on the book for another 3 years, which is insane.
Yeah, congrats.
I knew it was good.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. When Chip Zdarsky contacted me and he said, hey, guess what? You got the best deal in comics. And we were laughing. And I said, no, you make more money than me. And he said, no, it's true. But in terms of your ability to plan, right? Your ability to know you can foreshadow and pay off properly. Like there are people who are going to do longer runs than me on a superhero title. But there's this imminent every 6 months or 8 months or whatever, look over your shoulder. Is it my time? Like is the Reaper there for me? And I don't have that, which is crazy. And feels really, really good. And, they told me I had 12. By the time we hit like issue 3 or 4, and we were still doing multiple printings and the book sales were going up, it was like, okay, the big hopeful plan has become the plan. Yeah. Let's put a ring on it. Let's just figure out how that's going to work and what may have you. And then it was just figuring out terms and money and schedule and all that stuff and how much is too much and in terms of deliverables and all those kinds of things. And then we wanted to finalize it before San Diego because we wanted to be able to have that announcement. And so the great thing was everyone had the same goal, and that's what feels so good working with the team over there, whether it's my editor, Chris, and my assistant editor, Ashley, or, Fred and Jay at Heroic or Will and Ricky at Titan or all these people. Everybody, Sean, who does the Conan YouTube channel, like that guy is one of the nicest people, and they're all Marcos, who's doing all the marketing and production and stuff. They're all awesome people, and I've gotten to know all of them, and we all have the same kind of vision and goals, which is amazing. And so we're not entering into these meetings at cross purposes. That's what's so cool about it, is we're just sort of focused and going like, okay, how can we make this hit as strong as humanly possible? Or what can we do to have the maximum kind of impact? And how much time does that take and all that kind of thing? Ashley is our scheduling wizard, and she's done an amazing job working with these multiple art teams to make sure they've got time to do their best, that it's not just about crank it out, hit the deadline, but it's like, Savage Sword is a showcase. That's its legacy. It's one of the best looking books in the industry. How much time do you need to make that work look that good? And how can we make, empower you to do that as much as possible? So like literally yesterday, we were talking about issue 25 of Conan that's going to be coming out June or July next year. And I know what the book is, and I'm going to work on the script soon because we want to make that book extra special. And we want to do some extra cool stuff with it. And so we're going to give people the time they need to make that look the way it should. You know what I mean? That's the great thing about it is we know and we can plan for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a matter of, but are we going to get to 25? It's like, oh, we're getting to 25, you know? And
I love how you've had that redemption from like writing his sunset to now you're like, you have new anniversaries.
It does feel redemptive.
It's got to feel good.
I don't want to sound mean spirited about it, because I'm not. I really thoroughly enjoyed my time doing the Book of Marvel. I love working at Marvel. I love writing superhero stuff. I love writing all kinds of, all those things. And the Marvel crew, they're dear friends, right? Mm-hmm. Is it vindicating to have a hit book with Conan? Yes, of course. Yeah. There's no other way to put it, and no one, I think, is going to blame me for saying that it's very vindicating to have the book the way that I've envisioned it, and to have the readership and the fandom respond to it, and not just the old school, although that's very, very valuable to me, but people like yourselves who have never read the book before and now feel like they have a vested interest in the book, that they want to know more about it, and that they appreciate what we're doing. Pleasing the hardcore is means a lot to me, obviously, because they've been with us longer than I've been alive. But on the other hand, it's like, we need to grow and we need to find the next generation of readers, but that isn't at the expense of the fan base. And I think that's, when you're working with icons, that's really got to be the goal. Is you can't please everybody. And we do have, some naysayers and what may have you, but there are still North Star kind of elements that you need to keep in mind. And if you can, it's amazing to me that I'm switching gears, but with purpose here. The Blackstone miniseries in some ways is the ultimate vindication, even weirdly, maybe more than the relaunch, right? The relaunch is hugely vindicating, of course, but now we're taking other Robert E. Howard characters that there is very little fan base for. And we are generating excitement for that stuff because we've built up a year and a half of trust. Right. That because you've enjoyed every other Conan book that's come out from Heroic and Titan, you believe this miniseries is going to be worth its cover price as well, alongside your regular monthly purchase. Right. That says a lot, because getting, separating the cover price for one book a month, that is a goal. And then you build trust. And then Savage Sword was another. Hey, it's a weird format for the modern market. It's this classic throwback format. And a bunch of old school fans say they would love to see this, but like, you need different bags and boards, and they're going to sit in a weird part of the shelf. And the retailers are like rolling their eyes, like, really, newsprint? But it has a very specific form factor, and it means a lot to a very vibrant fan base that
smell.
Still,
oh my God, the smell.
It's got a tactile quality to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
it really does.
If you grew up in that era, it means something. And it had been floated at Marvel, the idea of doing it black and white or doing it oversized. And the response that I heard was that they reached out to retailers, and retailers said, no way, we're not going to invest in that. You know what I mean? And so did they get bad info? I don't know. That was years earlier, different market, different forces, different whatever. And we were riding this high of, check this out. We made this cool Bronze Age by way of modern throwback book. We got these, guys old enough to be my dad that are invested deeply. We're getting fan mail that just says Savage Sword, Savage Sword. We want to do it. So we pilot project this 6-issue, thing. And it was going to be only 6 over 12 months. Cross your fingers, and the sales have been amazing, and the response has been amazing. And artists that we literally could not get to respond to us originally when we had reached out to them are like banging down the door trying to do stuff because they believe in it now. And we prove we can make it the real deal, and that we could also find new artists and bring them into the fold. I want to have whatever Carrie Nord and Joe Jusko, all these kinds of classic artists.
It was so great to see Joe
Jusko. Like, dude,
getting
that issue 1 was the most mind-bending experience. I've said this so many times, but I can't help but say it. I pulled that comp copy of Savage Sword #1 out of the box, and it's a time capsule with my name on it. Like, it's like, that is the book I grew up on, but it says Zub at the bottom. Like, that's stupid. Joe is such a gentleman too, and such a right. Like it's crazy,
such
man.
a legend.
He signed
It's insane.
It's the most ridiculous thing. What was funny was the first time I met him in person was at New York Comic Con last year, and so we knew he was going to be doing a cover, and he had already started, talking about it, and we were on emails together, and I was giddy like a school child or whatever. And I'm at New York, and I told him I was going to come up to his table and see him. And when I got to New York and the show started, I was so busy. I had a line, and I was just signing Conan's. And so I didn't leave my table. And so he came down and saw me. And so all of a sudden the whole line just goes, "That's Joe Jusko." And he just comes marching over to me. "Are you coming to visit or not?"
No, come back over here. Come back over here.
And so people wanted to just get photos of us and stuff. It was very sweet.
Sure.
And someone in line, maybe like 10 people back, just yells out and goes, "Joe, do a new cover," like this, right? He looks over and he goes, "That'd be cool, right?" And we just start laughing because it's already happening,
Yeah.
And then I wrote that prose story in the first issue, which was the most audacious, what the hell am I thinking thing I could possibly do. But what a cool, crazy experience, right? I mean, this whole year has been the most mind-bending stuff between going to Robert E. Howard Days, which is this book festival that takes place in Cross Plains, Texas, which is where Howard lived most of his life and where he passed away. His house is an American heritage home, and it's a museum. It's very small. Like, don't go expecting, a lot. It's a very tiny house in the middle of rural Texas. And people joke that it's like a pilgrimage, but it kind of is, because you got to effort. I had never been. I flew to Dallas, rented a car, and you drive for over 3 hours. And the last 40 minutes is mostly dirt roads. And you pull into this.
When did you decide to do this? Like and where were you in the writing process with Conan?
So I was supposed to go to Howard Days, as they call it, in 2020. Because I was the flagship writer of Conan, and it was the 50th anniversary of Conan #1, Roy Thomas and I were supposed to both go to Howard Days and do a retrospective on the start of the series and where the series is now. And then the pandemic, and obviously none of that happened.
Right.
But so I was supposed to go 2020, and then of course they, everything gets canceled and whatever. And I think they did it again 2023. And Jeff Shanks, he's the archaeologist / scholar who writes those essays in the back. He's a phenomenal resource of everything pulp. He had been needling me just endlessly. Like, you got to go. These are all of our people. And he goes every year, and it's like a big reunion for him. And I said, dude, like, I am a part of this thing, of course, but you've been a part of this thing for decades, and you know all these people. I am an interloper. I am the flagship writer of Conan the Barbarian, but there are also a huge part of the people that go to that festival who only read the Howard prose, and they think of everything commercially associated with Howard as bad, like video games, movie, toys, comics. It's all garbage because it's not the original literary work. Right. And I don't want to get into it with some dude who's going to try and get me to quote line and verse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you don't really know it unless you can repeat this speech from scratch. It's like this is what I was imagining was like these dedicated, unbelievably passionate, uncompromising fans that I was going to come up against, and they were going to make me look like a fool, And Jeff's like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, these are some of the nicest people. These are my friends. Like, it's fine. You're fine. They like your work and da. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't know, man. And finally it was just like, kind of, like do it or don't kind of thing. And I said, well, if any year they love us right now, this is the safest version of this thing that I could possibly have. And then we got nominated. So there's this thing called the Robert E. Howard Foundation. And to the outside, it seems crazy. So I'll try and explain it. We got nominated for one of the Robert E. Howard Foundation Awards. And you sort of think to yourself, well, duh, you're writing Conan. Of course, you're going to get nominated for a Robert E. Howard Award. But that is actually not normal. So the Robert E. Howard Foundation is a group of archivists and literary scholars and publishers and all this stuff, small press publishers, and they believe in Howard as one of the most important and formative genre authors, and their goal is to maintain and celebrate his work. Okay, he's not part of the rights holders, and he's not associated. They're not associated with the family. They're their own thing, and they have their own members and their own stuff. You know what I mean? And their own hardcore arguments amongst all the literary whatever.
No doubt.
And what I was essentially told by Heroic was they're great in the sense that they are this foundational element that is hardcore and they're super fandom, but you'll never really please them because they are so intense, right?
Of course.
And Jeff knows all these guys and is part of this whole thing. And he's like, no, they're great. And I'm like, sure. Because you're part of this thing, right?
Yeah, you're entrenched in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So getting nominated for that award, I've been writing Conan stuff since Gail and I did it in 2015. And the foundations never looked our direction. They generally don't nominate Conan stuff. They nominate, they would rather nominate a pulp style writer who's just doing fantasy stuff that feels Howardian or feels like that person's clearly influenced by Robert E. Howard. They if you do a literary text or essays or things like that, or that's the kind of stuff that they respond to, right?
Yeah, not comic
they've
book
only nominated in the past,
right?
Yeah, they've only nominated comics that have been direct adaptations of Howard's work, right?
Yeah, sure.
So if you did Tower of the Elephant and it's perfect, boom, then you're going to get a nomination because you're lifting up the original man's work. So we got nominated in 2 categories for Bound in Blackstone, which is an original Conan story.
Yep.
That was unheard of. Comics don't get nominations in the literary category in particular. And so that already was sort of audacious and ridiculous. And I said, well, I guess I'm going to go. And the murmur I heard was, you're going to lose because there's no friggin' way a comic is going to take it. But be so pleased because you have broken new ground in terms of even being nominated, And I was like, great, I'm not, no pressure, but this is the year to go for all these reasons.
Right.
Jeff's insistence and the book's doing well. And we got nominated for this award so I can, show up and be magnanimous when someone better wins and all that stuff. And so I go, and the timing was crazy. Dallas Fan Expo was the same weekend. So the literary festival is Friday, Saturday. And then Sunday I was going to do a 1-day appearance at the Dallas Fan Expo show. So I got to do a convention, standard kind of comic convention. Great. So if the festival is a complete wash, I can do a regular Comic-Con and for
still
1
have
day,
that.
Still will lick my wounds and fly home or whatever. And I went and I had
they love me. They really love me.
Oh, it was crazy. Yeah. It was really, really, really amazing. People were super sweet and they were wonderful. And I just had an amazing time. It was crazy being on the grounds. We actually went a day early, and Sean, the guy who does the Conan YouTube channel and the website, he flew out a day early and brought a camera, and we filmed a whole bunch of documentary style material that's going to go up on the website for the next year. We filmed, like 7-8 hours worth of stuff. And
oh, wow.
When I say it's a museum, there's these little old ladies that, the museum's not open because who comes to Cross Plains, right? So you show up and there's a sign with a telephone number you call, and they're like, hey, I'm here to see the Howard House. And these retired little old ladies come and they unlock the house for you and they give you a tour. And they take you around the thing, and then they take you to the gift shop and they try to encourage you to buy stuff to help keep the house up.
Of course.
And they knew we were coming. So we showed up and they unlocked the whole house, and we're just filming and we're walking around the grounds and all this stuff. And then they took all the ropes down for all the rooms, and they were just like, go wherever you want because, you're the Conan guys. And so they were like, Jim, sit at Howard's desk, and all this stuff, which you're not normally doing,
Right.
And so I had these unbearably insane, surreal moments where we were like, it was nuts. It was the weirdest, kind of most amazing thing. On the Friday morning, I got there early before all the programming started. And it was just Jeff and I sitting on the porch of the house. And we were talking about life and working on the book and future plans and all this stuff. And I got this like weird, dude, I'm sitting I'm sitting at the Howard house with you. Like, we'd never met in person until that weekend. We've been working together for over a year. And I said, this is the wildest thing. And he goes, oh no, man, this is just every June for me. This is just what I do. And he goes, and now it's for you too. And I was like, oh yeah. And he goes, see, I told you you'd be part of the family. And I was like, yeah, but it is weird. It's like I showed up to your family reunion and I've got a deed to the house. Like I'm like doing stuff, like I'm invested in this thing. And he goes, yeah, but you're doing a great job. So it was very sweet. And then we won the literary award. So there you go.
Yeah. It's incredible.
So that was the craziest. So it was so funny because when I posted about it, like the general public is like, hey, the guy doing Conan stuff won a Howard Award. Like, who cares? And you go, within this
like, wow, what a shocker.
Like,
to the outside.
Sort of like saying, so the guy writing Spider-Man got the Stan Lee Award. That's the
right. Wow. Jeez, good job.
But it's different. It represents something different. And so it's very meaningful to me because I know what that means. You know what I mean?
It's incredible.
And it's very cool as a bit of a thing. Yeah, it's been
how amazing is it though? Like to have that many feathers in your cap, right? You win this award. You will have been writing Conan for 10 years next year, and you'll have a milestone issue of 25.
I actually have the next year's a really cool milestone. I think I've talked about this. You guys get it. I don't want to say like it's an exclusive, but it sort of is. I was talking to the reprint editor who's doing those omnibuses and all that stuff, and we were talking about credits and all those things. And he goes, do you know who wrote the most Conan stories? And I go, yeah, Roy Thomas. And he goes, yeah, of course. And he goes, who wrote the second most? And I was like, I have no idea, actually. I have no idea. And he goes, yes. And I threw a bunch of names or whatever. And he's like, you're wrong. It was Michael Fleischer. And I was like, oh, right. Okay. So Michael Fleischer took over the book after Roy, and he wrote the monthly, and he wrote a bunch of Savage Sword stuff. But it was a weird transitional period. And this is nothing against Michael, but I think a bunch of that sort of falls between the cracks. And I don't think there's because all the adaptation had already been done, he kind of he's doing a bunch of stuff, but it's very much, it's not on rails by any means, but there's definitely formulas, you know what I mean, that you can see in a lot of the stuff. And then Jim Owsley takes over Christopher Priest, right? And Priest does some cool stuff.
Yeah, I love Priest.
He doesn't stay on for a long, long time. So then the third most Conan writer is Tim Truman. Truman did a pile of stuff at Dark Horse, way more than I think most people realize. He had just this really long, cool run. And so we figured out how many credits that was, and I think it's like 56 or something. And so by next summer, I'll have 57 issues of Conan.
All right. Let's do it.
Still got multiple years. So I'm gonna overtake.
Coming for you, Roy.
Truman. No. Roy is
Come on, we're shooting high, Joe.
I will happily take the silver medal for most Conan stories, and then get as much sprinting distance as I can. So that's my.
There you go.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Wow.
And then did you see the sword? You saw the crazy sword thing? Did you see that? Do you guys know about this?
Elaborate. What do you?
Oh, you don't know about the sword? Oh, good. You're gonna love this. So we're finalizing this contract for this 3-year contract extension. Past my initial year, all this sort of stuff, and we had been joking at San Diego during the issue 1 launch. We were having a crazy time and lineups and signings and whatever. And I said, if this goes long, you guys should give me a sword. And they were laughing. And so we're doing the contract negotiation and the lawyers and everyone's figuring stuff out. And we're down to the point where we're now on email chains and someone goes, is there anything else? And
of course there is.
I'm just being a dick. I'm just being a bit of a dick. And I said, what about that sword that came up during?
Remember that sword I talked about? Yeah.
The sword. You guys should send me a sword. And they were like, are you serious? And I was like, yeah, man. Yeah, I thought, it'd be really cool to get a sword, and it's a nice milestone, and, and a representation of good work and all this stuff. And one of the accountant guys gets, Jim, we're paying you very well. You can go buy one of those replica swords. And I said, it was, they meant well by it. And all of a sudden I bristled. I was like, no. I said, I can buy stuff all the time. I've got money. I can buy whatever, but it doesn't mean anything if I buy it. If you bequeath it to me, that means I earned it. Do you guys think do you guys think I earned it? And then there was, you know what I mean? Like that was the question. Like, am I doing right by the property? Am I doing right by you guys? This big, long, cool plan, this relaunch.
How could they say no?
The old fan base back. And it was weird that I all of a sudden sort of dug my heels in, because that's not, it was on such a stupid thing too. But all of a sudden it meant something to me, and I really like. And then the last little point I put in brackets, I'm like, plus it's good. It's good marketing. You should send me a sword.
There you go.
Yeah, so Greg from accounting.
Yeah. Come on, dude. So while I'm in Chicago, for Chicago Fan Expo, this shows up.
Wow.
So that is a movie quality replica sword. It is. It's more than 10 pounds. It's very heavy.
That's incredible.
It's a beast.
That's
man.
awesome.
It's the Atlantean blade, buddy. So I haven't had a chance to hang it up yet. So that's why it's right behind me.
Oh yeah. In case you need some inspiration, you can just turn around and hold it for a little while.
Gorgeous.
Yeah,
really,
that's
really
awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
And it's the craziest, weirdest thing. And I posted that up, and my friends lost their minds, of course, because
that's incredible.
What the hell? Who gets that? What is that? That is insane. And so when you say I've had the wildest year, you don't even know.
I can just imagine. I can imagine what the next guy is going to want, because he knows that you were able to negotiate in there.
I said, look, if we do an extension, I get the father's sword. That's the other one.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
So, but it's whatever. It's very cool. It's very sweet. It was, it feels like a really cool moment right now, and I never, ever, ever, ever want to take it for granted. That's the most important part. That it's not like we're not resting on our laurels. We don't think that we've got it all figured out. I don't think that we're perfect. One of the things I kind of warned Titan about, I said, the bloom's going to come off the rose. Like, we're in this honeymoon period. I said that almost a year ago. We're in this honeymoon period where people are loving the book and they're loving every issue, and we're getting these crazy, more reviews for like issue 12 than most people get for an issue 1. And what the hell? This is amazing.
Facts.
It's a good word of mouth. Mm-hmm. And I said, it will fade. Like, we're settling into a really good spot, but it can't last. Like, just be real that we need to. I don't want to lower our expectations. We should always shoot for as high as we can go. But please don't get crazy and think that it will always be like this, And then this year we had a big party at San Diego with our crew, and we were sitting around and we were like, well, so far so good. The momentum is still here. I can't believe it. I do think there will come moments where people are we can't help, the fan base. At some point I will disappoint them in some, regard, but as long as the aggregate quality is there, and as long as we're pushing every single month to make the best handbook we can, then I feel like that people will remember the hits and they'll forget the misses, and we'll build this really cool thing. That's the most important part.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, just touching on going into Howard's legacy. I know you had talked in that Stone's Throw essay or prelude in Savage Sword #4 about going back into his pulp stuff and characters his inspiring you. Do you have any plans to or designs on new characters of your own to bring into?
I mean, Brissa's a brand new character, right? So Brissa was really kind of a test case for us. So she represents something really, really important to me. And I think this is fairly obvious, but I don't think we've ever said it on paper. But you've got Brule, right? So Brule, the Spear Slayer, the Pict in the Thurian Age, and then you've got Bran Macmorn, who's a character that we haven't used yet in the new series, and that's very much by design, and not perfectly midpoint. But in the Hyborian Age, you have Brissa, Brule, Brissa, Bran, like that is the lineage. That is a royal Pict kind of lineage that she represents. And I wanted to show that the Picts could be more than just one of the things that Howard talks about in a lot of his works is this idea of and it's very much built off of all sorts of weird alternative kind of history stuff that was floating around texts at the time. This idea that you can evolve, but you could devolve, that cultures could fall back down the kind of evolutionary ladder, if you
right.
you know what I mean. And so the Picts have a more kind of royal sort of slant in the Thurian age, and by the time we get to the Hyborian age, something has happened that has brought them low again. And I wanted to say that it's more complex than that. And Howard showed that in a bunch of other areas where he has different offshoots of particular races or species or all kinds of funky things, whether it's in Worms of the Earth or oh man, I'm trying to think of some of the other weird ones where he's playing with some of even the Kerwin and Conrad stories. One of the characters bumps their head and they end up seeing their past lives and realizing that they've evolved and devolved like multiple times and all this kind of stuff. And so cool. I wanted to kind of play off of that idea that there are these broader patterns of genealogy done in this pulpy kind of way. It's not real science, but in the context, in the continuity, in the Marvel universe, there's 100 wacko things that we accept as real. So there's wacko, amazing things that happen in the Hyborian age, right? And so the Picts have devolved, but that the part of the reason why they've devolved is because of this curse of the Blackstone, that it has brought them low and it has corrupted their souls and destroyed their spirits. But Brissa's particular tribe had not, that they were represented this, more noble kind of offshoot, that they had managed to stay free of the corruption, but then had been slain by, other clans. And so Brissa it was a way to sort of go, can we introduce this new character that fits into the overall plan? Will readers accept her? Will she work? Or, are they just going to beat down the door and tell us that we're doing wrong by Howard by introducing new stuff? And thankfully, she went over really well. I knew we were doing well when it looked like we killed her and everyone sent us angry letters. And I was like, yes, that's what I want.
They care about her.
You liked her, And
I was in that camp. I was like, where'd she go? Right. I need her back.
Hell,
yeah,
you
I was
killed
in that
her
camp
off
for sure.
page. What kind of a dick move?
Yeah.
And it's
yeah.
Perfect, because if we didn't get to do more than those 12, like if you're a character who goes on adventures with Conan in the original Howard text, you're a dead man. Like none of those characters stick around. You're dead. Almost every woman is not there on the next story, or every poor bastard that's got to go on a quest with Conan. You are red-shirted, buddy. You are toast.
You're red-shirted for sure. Yeah.
Us killing her off in some ways also felt kind of pulpy too and tragic. You're like, you don't get to stick around and romance with Conan. Yeah. You were on an adventure with Conan. You're dead, lady.
It's on brand. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's on brand. And so for me, I felt like we had it both ways, where the hardcore were like, no, that's a Conan story. She's dead meat. And then the classic comic readers like, it's off page. She's clearly coming back. And I'm like, she's Schrodinger's Brissa. She's whatever we want her. She's dead. She's alive. And so it worked out really well in that sense. But to answer your question, yes, there's more characters I want to introduce and stuff that we want to do, but always with an eye for building off of or echoing thematic stuff that is in a Howard story. In the same way that I'm trying not to just retell or readapt the original Howard stories, but like Thrice Marked for Death only works because of Queen of the Black Coast, because Belit is dead, Conan is in his cups, and now he's joined up with the Glory Hounds and yada, yada, yada. The Glory Hounds Guild is a completely made up thing, but it's an after effect of this canon Howard story. You know what I mean? So one of the things I'm working on right now is and this was, you were asking about stuff in the original proposal. The original Howard pulp stories jump around the timeline. The very first Conan story that was ever published is Phoenix on the Sword. He's a king already. We don't get Conan as a young adventurer until the third published Conan story, And so I wanted to be able to jump around the timeline. And the way I proposed it was that all the stories would thematically hang together. So obviously our first year is all built off Blackstone, right? So, Bound in Blackstone, we set up all these pieces. Thrice Marked for Death, you think it's just a heist, and then we reveal, bum, 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 spoilers, there's a piece of Blackstone, right? So it's not, it is its own separate heist story, and you could read it on its own, but it echoes what we taught you in the first story. And then the third story directly vaults off that, because obviously Conan gets, punted back to the Thurian Age. All the Thulsa Doom stuff that we set up in the first, couple issues all starts to pay off. That Thulsa Doom is this bigger deal because we had him in the ritual, and there's a cult trying to bring him back in the Hyborian Age and all this sort of crazy crap.
And we get that cosmic perspective that you talked about earlier.
Exactly.
That broad,
and then the cosmic
I love that.
Which blew our minds, by the way.
Man, when I got those pages, I literally got goosebumps. Like, I got those pages and I
so
thought,
good.
Who wrote this stuff? This is madness. This is so good.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of that issue 12. What the hell, man?
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of the end of Blackstone 4, because one of the things we keep teasing is that there is a purpose, that there is a thing, that we're not just going to endlessly blue ball you guys and say, there's a thing. There's a thing. Find out what the thing is. And when you find out the thing, I think you'll realize the cool potential, that what we can do with it. Maybe not the full extent, but you'll go, oh boy, what now? And year 2 has its own theme, and it's going to start unfolding. In some ways, Frozen Faith, the current arc, is like, it's important because we're getting the story of Conan in his youth, and him coming to grips with the idea of faith and a hidden world of the supernatural and gods that he doesn't fully believe in.
So good.
That he understands his senses, what he can touch and what he can, he's so physically powerful that the physical world, he understands it and he can conquer it. So what is it to realize that there are things you cannot defeat, right? That there are gods, that there are spirits, there is magic. And that really struck on the way that story happened was unusual. It was not part of my original plan. And so when I went out there and I did the press tour and I said, we're not adapting Howard stories. We're never going to adapt Howard stories. And then I immediately fell into this thing where all of a sudden I was about to adapt a Howard story. And the reason why was twofold. So I can, who knew?
Yeah.
Doug was only going to do one arc. So Doug was only going to do Thrice Marked for Death. And we got along so well, and we just had so much fun working together. And I begged him to stick around, and he thought about it. And then he said, I don't know what other project I'd even want to do. I'm having so much fun. Of course, I'll stick around and do
That's what you want to hear.
And I said, I'm a slave to your needs, man. Where do you want the stories that you tell me you want? Young Conan, old Conan. Give me a geography. Tell me what monsters you want to fight. I will, bespoke a story to your needs, because I'm so happy you're sticking around. And he said, those Frazetta paintings in the north are so iconic to me. I want to do a story set in the snow in Asgard.
Yep.
And I was like, crap. That's like one of the only places I don't have a story idea in mind, and it's not part of the big plan. Yes, of course, Doug, I'll do whatever you want. And so the only canon Howard story that's set in the north is Frost Giant's Daughter. So I reread it for inspiration. And, when you're in this mode of brainstorming, when you're trying to come up with story ideas and concepts, you're just opening yourself up to information. You're reading, but there's a part of your brain that's like asking questions on every paragraph you read. Do you know what I mean? And I'm read the story, and then I'm reading the wiki, and I'm reading some essays about it. And of course, someone mentions this is the earliest written Conan canon story. Like, they mention the Battle of Venaria in Beyond the Black River, but this is Conan at his youngest, written by Howard in the moment that it's happening.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And I go, oh, that's very interesting. Wait a minute. That means this could be the very first time he interacts with something supernatural.
Yep.
Wait a minute. What does that mean? And then you start drilling down into that. What does that mean? What does that mean? What questions am I asking because of that? And then, I'm not here to make Conan me, but you can't help but filter things through your own experiences. And then you start thinking about faith, and you start thinking about, well, when you were a kid or when you're growing up, what's that weird moment where you realize I don't believe these things, or you said it, your parents don't always tell the truth. You know what I mean? You realize that your parents are liars, and you're like, oh, people lie. People do bad things. Bad people, sometimes good people do bad things. Sometimes people lie about all kinds of crazy stuff. I don't know if I believe in God or, whatever. Right.
Yeah.
And so this idea of Conan questioning the faith of the Sumerians and questioning Crom, that just got me down a really cool rabbit hole of ideas. And then I said, well, but that means we're no longer telling a story outside of the Frost Giant's daughter, because the worst thing we could do is go, and then Conan experiences the supernatural off page.
Right.
And it's really cool. And you're like, yeah, can we maybe see that moment? You're like, no, we'll do it.
No, it was awesome though. Trust us. Yeah, it was awesome though.
Really pivotal to this dude's development.
Right.
And so all of a sudden I realized that Frost Giant's daughter had to be part of the story, but then we had to build this kind of fortress around it in terms of concepts and theme and theology and all this sort of stuff. And so I just got in the lettering proof on 16, which are in some ways is an epilogue. 15 is the adaptation of Frost Giants, but we've got this cool extra element, which you guys now know because you read 14, where we have Atali's inner voice. The first time we've had a narrative caption from a character's POV, which I think is really fun and different and gives us more meat on the bone to explore, and allowed me to keep my ego in check, where I said we weren't going to adapt Howard stories unless we could do something like that. We're doing something more. We're not just doing line by line, verse by verse, that we're going to give you, of
course,
like it or don't like it. We've got a little more to add. You know what I mean? So even the people who know the original story can read it and hopefully get something cool, new out of it. And then issue 16 is the button. Like, that's the one we really push and we go, this is the mission. Like, this is why we told you this story. This is why you had to see it. And I hope it means as much to you guys as it does to me, because 16 is, I joked when we got 15 in, I said 15 is our best issue. And then we got 16 and I'm like, like maybe 16 is our best issue. It's really heartfelt and we've all put our all into it. We put our all into it every month, but it's like, this one really feels super, super special. And it's weird because it's a transitional story between the big movements. It is technically part of the big structure now, but it's not part of the original theme. Like, if year 1 is Blackstone, year 2 is something else that you're going to discover. And Frozen Faith fits between those two, and it's connective tissue and it has something to say, but it isn't a singular line. You know what I mean? So once we kick into, the next arc after this is called Twisting Loyalties. And we're jumping around the timeline again. The solicit's already out. So we're jumping back to the height of Conan and Belit's kind of piracy, their fame, infamy, if you will.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And their love and their lust for each other. And so we get to see them, the tragedy, but you get to see them at these moments. And they're going to uncover something that you need to know. Now you need to know it, because it's going to pay off over the course of a year's worth of stories. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to have it built, to know that it's working. It feels so absolutely surreal. We get on these conference calls, editorial conference calls, and I'm just sort of threading all this stuff. And I go, and then that's going to pay over there. And then we're going to do that. And Chris Patera just starts laughing. And he's like, you feel like the crazy guy with the red strings on, the meme.
The conspiracy. Yeah.
And then it's going to go over here. And then that's going to happen.
I'm like, sure, Jim.
Yeah, okay. Sure, trust me. It's in the documentation. You're just like,
that's funny. And, I know that I know, so like Conan's like his crisis of faith almost, right? That sends him on this initial journey, and he starts exploring everything. I think it plays into the theme of just like what makes him so relatable to begin with. Obviously, you can relate that to your own experiences perhaps, but there's like core elements of this character that are universally unifying, right? So like, not only is it a survival, it's man against nature, it's man against man, it's man against whatever, his own psyche, it's growing as a character, it's exploring the world, exploring the unknown, finding that treasure, slaying the dragon, getting the girl, you know what I mean? Like, it's all those things, that hero's journey.
Howard wrote all kinds of different stories. The Conan stories are just a small part of his literary kind of canon. And he wrote a bunch of survivalist stories, and he wrote a bunch of very man against nature or man against the world or explorer kind of stories. And I feel like those are at the heart of that, because we'd gone as big as you can go. Like, we went back to the Thurian age and we like cracked this cosmic insanity. It's like, we got to not turn it down. Like, it's still exciting, but we got to shift gears. We got to create contrast.
Right.
We did epic, dark, wild sword and sorcery and time travel and mind bending stuff and, Yag Kosha and all these things. It's like a guy trying to survive in the wilderness. There are wolves. You're like, cool. Can I make that compelling and interesting? And that's got as much depth of feeling and gravitas as whatever, a Blackstone sarcophagus cracking time, like all this kind of crazy crap. Like that I can do that as well. And that means a lot to me. There's, again, like I said, there's moments in, I think, issue 16, some of the dialogue and the interplay is some of the best stuff I've written. And it's some of the most heartfelt stuff I've written, which sounds weird to say that about Conan, a series where you're like, how many limbs are we lopping off this month? But there's got to be something, a beating heart underneath it as well. Otherwise, why are we doing it? John C. Hawking, who's one of my favorite pastiche writers, he told me I was doing right by Belit in Thrice Marked for Death. And he said, and this is nothing against like anyone else who's written the character, but he was saying, she's dangerous. Like, the reason why, they end up on that down the Zarkiba River and they end up getting all killed, spoilers, at the end of Queen of the Black Coast, is because of her obsession and her lust and her uncompromising, personality. And so if you just play her like the girlfriend or like that's a disservice to her. Like, there's a reason why there's a ship's crew that worships her like a goddess. Like, she's dangerous and charismatic and a little scary. Yeah. She's the bad girl that your mom warned you about turned up to 25. Like, she's, she's all those things. And so I wanted to show that mercurial quality when we did those flashbacks with her, where she's literally like, ready to hump, but also going to pull the knife and threaten to kill him. You're like, this is the gothiest girlfriend ever. She's so amazing, but she's so scary. That's the whole point is she's on that razor's edge. And that's why you love it. Those people that you partied with and you're like, by the end of tonight, either we're going to die or fill out a police report, or I'm going to have the best time of my life. Like, that's the whole thing, right? She is that personified in the Hyborian age. And so I wanted to play this kind of intensity to her and this, but you would love her. You would follow her, right over the cliff. Like, that's gotta be in the mix. And so on this new storyline we're doing, where we're showing them at the height of their fame, she's just drinking in this power and this ability to control and do what she wants when she wants. But she's also deeply committed to Conan, and he's deeply committed to her. So it's like, it's not toxic, but it's also crazy. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's the best time of your life, but man, am I glad we survived that kind of stuff. And that's what I kind of wanted to make it feel like, and you can see those qualities where you're like, oh, she's so sweet and thoughtful. Oh, she's also jealous and intense and uncompromising. And you're like, oh yeah, it's all that mercurial power, that's what I've been sort of playing with. And it's a heady mix of stuff. And when it works, man, it's super fun. And in all the best ways, so and to being able to jump back to that, give you this cool moment to better appreciate who she was and who they were. And then it's only a 2-part story, but it sets up a piece that then we use in the next story. And so again, it's like the Blackstone stuff where it vaults you forward. You get the info you need when you need it, and then we pay off cool stuff down the line. Wow. So it's going to be so fun. I am giddy. and I, like, I'm trying to hold it all back. I just want to blurt it all out all the time. My poor wife,
sure.
you know, we're like sitting over the dinner table and I'm just rambling like a madman about all this crazy stuff. And she's like, I can tell you're really happy. And I'm like, you don't even give a damn about anything I just said. But
that's awesome.
That's great.
I'm glad you're happy, honey. Yeah.
It's just kind of like, it's amazing, like kind of putting this all into place, all the things that you've been able to share with us. Like you're balancing the cosmic with the action adventure, and you're balancing script writing with, you know, like kind of going Marvel style, for lack of a better term. And you're like, there's so much of these balancing acts that are going on. It's almost like you're playing Beethoven and jazz at the same time.
I'm sort of become obsessive compulsive in the best way possible. It's like, it lit this fire underneath me. I'm going to just mix all my metaphors like a moron. I had this diamond and I dropped it, and somehow impossibly I caught it right before it hit the ground and someone else snatched it up. And now I'm holding it so tight, like the blood is pouring out between each of those facets, because I don't want to let it go, and I don't want to give it anything less than my best. Because it is really, really special, and it is really powerful. And when you realize the property and its generational quality, and that he's the original sword and sorcery hero, one of the most famous characters on earth. And someone said that this little guy from Oshawa is going to get to drive it for the foreseeable future. That is insane to me. When I was a kid, I wanted to meet Roy Thomas. I wanted to meet John Buscema, Barry Windsor Smith, fill in the blank. I wanted to meet the guys that made Dungeons and Dragons and Marvel Comics. I am already so ludicrously cosmically beyond any kind of whatever you would call a bucket list of how could this have even happened? You know what I mean? And so that drives me in a ludicrous way, where I'm just like, you shouldn't even be here. So you better run like hell before they catch you, you know, like just go, and make as much cool, crazy, amazing as you can for as long as you can. And please that little inner child that is losing his mind every time he gets to pull one of these copies out of a box, you know, with his name on it. Like literally, you know, like Blackstone 2 showed up today.
Oh, nice.
And my wife and I, whenever one of these boxes shows up, I crack it open and I pull out the top copy and I go, I made a comic. And she goes, yeah? And I go, yeah, honey. And she goes, you should keep doing that. And it's like our fun little stupid ritual that we do. And I've done this hundreds of times. And it still feels great. You know, it still feels cool. It's still fun. And that doesn't mean that it's easy. And it doesn't mean that every project goes the way you want it to. But on aggregate, it's still magically insane to me, you know, the whole ride that we're on. And if I can... Our job is communication and entertainment. And the first people I have to communicate with and entertain are my creative collaborators. Mm-hmm. This book is nothing without Rob De La Torre, and it's nothing without Doug Braithwaite. It's nothing without Jonas Scharf and Danica Breen and Diego Rodriguez and Richard Starkings and Chris Patera and Ashley Hodgkins and, you know, Jay Zetterberg and Fred Malmberg. And I can just name these people. This is a team of people, and I am the most moronically verbose and not camera shy. And so I will beat the drum endlessly, you know, but what I represent is the hard work of this entire legion of people. And I am not the most important part of that chain. I am just part of this big, cool thing that we're building. You know what I mean? And I'm so thankful that they put their trust in me to do it month in and month out. And that is insane, you know, and that the fan base feels like we're doing right by this thing that is older than me and continues ever onwards. That is what is so crazy, crazy cool about it. And I feel that way about getting the chance to do any icon. I've had the chance to write a Batman story, 2 Batman stories, Wolverine stuff and Iron Man and Black Panther and the Champions and Avengers and Rick and Morty and Samurai Jack and creator-owned books and all those other things. And man, if I can't enjoy doing that, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, that is the most stupid. Every so often I'll be at a convention, and I get it. It's the job is not always easy, but we're out having drinks, and there's some people, in the business, they act like they're being tortured, like they're talking about their day to day and how hard it is to get the work done, or collaborating with whoever's. And I get it. I've had some really annoying projects, and I've had some really annoying people I've worked with, or things like that. But man, it's better than a real job. Like, it's still like, where I'm for God's sake, I'm stressed about, what's Conan doing this week? Like, oh no, what am I going to,
Right. Count your blessings, man.
Yeah. I was talking to Zdarsky literally this morning, and we were talking about our convention schedules, and he was like, "Man, I got to fly to New York, and then I'm getting on a plane. I'm going to England," and we're laughing about it. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to London MCM Expo, and then I'm getting on a train. I'm stopping in Nottingham, and then I'm going to Newcastle. I'm running a Dungeons and Dragons game in a castle as part of the D&D 50th anniversary, and then I'm going up to do a signing." And I'm laughing, and we're both like, that's going to be a really hard month. And it's like, yeah, but it's amazing, and we're both laughing about how stupid it is,
Yeah. Would you rather be at home, not having those amazing opportunities and stuff? It's like, dude, this is part of the process.
Oh,
man.
woe is me,
It's part of the dream.
It's amazing. The book is in, I think we're in 7 languages now for Conan. And every time a new book comes out in a foreign language, we get bombarded with amazing social media and fan mail, The Portuguese fans are some of the most excited, passionate people I've ever seen, screaming, waving the book and telling me how much they love, El Barbaro, in Spanish, in Italian, in German, in French. Like, this is a global property. This is a global book, and people are digging it. Oh, woe is me. Like, I am locked in on the Hyborian Age as much as, I can be. And I'm so thankful that guys like you are reading and telling other people about it. It means a lot. Like, it really, really does. And I don't think you guys realize that constant word of mouth has been so valuable. It broke through the barriers with a lot of kind of calcified fans that thought they would never go back to the comic book store on a monthly basis. They were 100% like, I don't collect comics anymore. And the relentless, obnoxious good word of mouth over 5 or 6 months.
They are obnoxious, that's for sure.
It's great.
Hey.
No. It broke through. It broke through with retailers. It broke through. I got retailers coming up to me at cons telling me that it has like been this minor explosion in their store, that not only are they have customers they haven't seen in 20 years that are back with a pull list, and now they're there day and date for each Conan issue, but that they're buying collections of Conan back issues, and they're turning because people are just buying up back issues of Conan and Savage Sword again, because one issue is not enough a month. You know what I mean? Like, they need their fix, and the nostalgia is really pulling them in. And that feels so unbelievably special. And I feel so fortunate that we get to be a part of that we get to drive that conversation of excitement. I don't know if you guys have heard, there's this thing called Sumerian September. Do you know about this? So there's a group of YouTubers and bloggers that literally just talk about Conan for the entire month of September. And they do essays,
perfect timing,
video, all this stuff. And so I wanted to signal boost that as much as possible. And so I've been going back and rereading every original Conan story. I've read them all multiple times, but trying to read them now with this air of, you're the guy.
Yeah.
How do you feel about these stories? And so I'm posting these thoughts on my website, every single one. I'm going through them, and I'm not always like effusive. Like, some of the stories are weaker than others, and some of them are formulaic, and some of them are funky. But then there's also moments that I had forgotten how powerful they are, or how lyrical the verbiage is, and I appreciate them even more now than I did before. And so it's this fascinating thing of certain stories that I had kind of in my head, I remembered them, and then I reread them much more in depth, and I went, first of all, this is cool. Second of all, oh, there's a nugget there I think I can use in the big plan that I didn't originally have. And third of all, it's a fun month to celebrate and to try and turn people on to the original source material and remind them that this is a literary work first. And I love the comics and I love the movie and I love all the related stuff, but those 21 original stories, 18 of them published in Weird Tales magazine in the 30s, actually are the foundational kind of element. And they are not what you think. Conan has become a king by his own hand because he has a great deal of guile. He is very intelligent. By the time he becomes a king in Phoenix on the Sword, he knows multiple languages. He has a sense of geography. He helps fill in a whole area of a map with knowledge that he has of the world. He earns that kingdom. It's not just bequeathed to him. It's not a destined kind of a role. Do you know what I mean? He has led armies of people multiple times in his history and then becomes the king. And then over the course of all these different stories ricocheting around his timeline, they show you why, and they show you who he really is and the depth and breadth of those kinds of things. And like any iconic character, there's a ridiculous amount of stuff that happens, but that's kind of the fun of it, is how flexible he is, that he's a pirate and he's a soldier and he's a general and he's a mercenary and he's an explorer and he's in the desert and he's in the Arctic and he's in the, he's everywhere. He's the original survivor sellsword with wanderlust that will never be quenched. Right.
Yeah. That's the archetypal character. Right. So yeah, for sure.
Big time.
That's
Big
amazing.
Time. Cool.
You've been very, very generous with your time.
Yeah, I think that's the good note to end on, actually. So
I think it is. I wanted to ask you one more quick question, though.
Sure.
Can you give us anything to look? What can we look forward to in Battle of the Blackstone? I know we just started with issue 1. You've been talking about you've had some of the scripts done and things like that, but like any kind of
it's weird. The plan's been done for so long, to the point where New York Comic Con is coming up. A year ago at New York Comic Con, Jonas Scharf was there, and that was the first time I met him in person. We went out for dinner. And verbally over dinner at this restaurant in this booth, I'm laying out the whole thing verbally to him. I'm telling him every beat, every big payoff. And his eyes are just getting bigger and bigger as I tell him what crazy crap we're going to do, including the big end beat. And he was super on board. And he could tell it was going to be complicated because you have all these characters and all these different, areas and architecture and all this stuff. But he was on board, and he was the guy that I wanted. We really cast him specifically for the miniseries, and I knew he was going to do great. And lo and behold, he's done an absolutely phenomenal job. We had this weird thing where issue 0 obviously had some setup, but we couldn't assume that people were going to have the issue 0. So issue 1 had to sort of set the table for everything. We have to introduce all these characters and make sure that they've got stuff. Issue 2 makes it very clear what's at stake and why, and how bad it can get. Let's put it that way. And gives all the forward kind of thrust. You will have no doubt of what the characters need to do and where they're going and why. And I'm really excited about that. When I was coming up with the story, I had this kind of problem, and I can't tell you what it is, because if I tell you, it'll spoil some of the stuff. And the minute I solved it, I started laughing because I'm like, well, no one will see that coming. And that I feel like 2 is really going to have that moment. You're going to flip that page and be like, are you serious? Like, is okay, in the best way possible.
Nice.
And then 3 layers on top of that, we're going to build up as much amazing drama and stakes as humanly possible. And we're going to put these characters through the ringer, because that's how we know they're heroes, because they got to survive the worst things we can do to them. And boy, oh boy, do we do some horrific stuff. And then issue 4, we got to pay it all off. And it's called Battle of the Blackstone. So there better be a badass battle. And I think you'll agree that it's going to be pretty sweet when it all comes due. And then the ultimate card trick is if I can lay that last card down. And if I do it right, when you see it, it works, but you didn't see it coming. And that's the test, right? The best magic trick is the one that, in retrospect, it was the only way it could have gone, but you didn't see it coming till we dropped the card. So you guys will let me know, and I
Absolutely.
I'm excited to see how it all plays.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we're so excited again. Like how we opened, we have 3 new lifelong Conan fans because of the work that you and your team have done, and we just thank you so much for everything you guys have done so far. And we're very excited to see what you got coming in the future. So
none of it happens without the readership, without the amazing fans we've got, without the retailers who have really dedicated. The hand selling that happens at the retail level is this microcosm of recommendations that turns into lifelong fandoms, right? When some retailer goes, "This is my favorite book," or "I think you're going to love this," that does infinitely more than me banging the drum. Like, everyone knows why I'm trying to sell it. My name's on the front cover, right? So it's different when a retailer does it, and when a retailer does it with passion, that transforms, a book from a pull to a fan, and it's amazing. So thank you guys, and thank you everyone else who's reading. You guys are making my dreams come true every single month.
Yeah. Well, it's our pleasure, man. You keep doing what you're doing, man. We really appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.